And who I am. I spent about 30 years in the agency business doing primarily business to business work. Started in New York, came down to Georgia, worked for Fortune 500 companies. I was actually the agency of record for Georgia Ports Authority for 15 years. So I've had a pretty good spectrum of types of services. I never specialized in something. I describe myself as a strong A minus personality. I tend to feel like a 90 is as good as 100. So by the time I get to a 90, I'm done. I don't keep learning, which has led me into a career in strategy. So I find I am best served when I am focused on the bigger plan, the strategic plan, rather than getting done with day-to-day tactics, which is pretty much why I left the agency world. Because anybody who's ever worked in an ad agency knows you get drawn into every little minor thing that the agency is functioning with. So about 2 years ago, I split off on my own and I said, the biggest problem that mid-sized agencies have and small agencies have is they cannot afford to keep a strategist on staff. What happens is they end up taking on a strategist. That strategist then becomes an account manager, a pitch person, project manager, doing some creative. They do everything else except strategy about 70% of the time, and they're expensive. So they can't really afford to keep that person filled up with strategy. I came up with a concept. I said, I think I could push in and just be a strategist when you need me. So I said, I'll take on 5 clients and that's it. And I will be your ad hoc hired gun. Call me when you need me and I'll come in, do your strategy, and I'm going to walk out. It takes usually about 30 to 45 days to do what I do. It worked great. I now have probably more than 5 clients, more than I want. My laid back life turned into work, which I wasn't really thrilled about. But that's where I ended up. The reason I bring this up is it's fundamental to what I do. And what I do is carve out all the crap that you're dealing with in your brand. And I get down to very, very key parts, which is what is it that you can offer? Why do you deserve to exist? And who is going to be most attractive to you? So in my case, personally, it was very simple. Like agencies that want to be able to have a strategist on staff but can't afford it. Turns out there's lots of them. And for me, I didn't want to work every day. So it was a perfect connection. Brings me to the next point, which is brand strategy. I'm going to self-declare I am not a beer expert. Again, 90 character. I got to the point I understand the business enough. Other people know it way more than I do. I got involved with the Viking Alchemist Meadery in Marietta about 4 years ago. A friend of mine introduced me to them. They were at the time in an awful location. It was like going into the worst garage you could possibly have, but they made a great product. And I was talking to them and talking to the owners. It's a family business. And it just frustrated me that, you got this great product and you just your marketing is terrible. Like you're just getting in your own way every step you take. So I took them on as a pet project about 2 years ago because I wanted to see them succeed. I didn't want to see them fold up. I wanted the product to persist. I believe in giving back to the community. So they were my pro bono gift, basically. Spent about 2 years working on that. A lot of it was amplifying good decisions that they were making, but also tapping the rails and giving them suggestions about go this direction. All of it goes back to focusing on who are we really talking to, because it's a very particular audience. It's not wine drinkers. It's a little bit of beer drinkers, but it's a very niche personality that appeals to them. And then about a year and a half ago, they revealed to me that they had won an award in Georgia as the best meat in Georgia. To give you a little fundamental idea of what kind of client this is, they told me this after they won the 3rd time. And what do you do with that? Like, I don't even know how to handle it. I just, after blowing up at them and saying, come on, man, really? Just 3 times you did this and you didn't say a word. We decided that we should own the category in Georgia, that it is a vacuum. No one has taken leadership. There's nobody in charge. There's a power vacuum. So we set on a mission to basically be the best meat in Georgia. Now, I will say, I think they make one of the best meats in Georgia, but no one was really carrying that torch, and they had credential to do it. It led into a strategic plan that involved their social media, their website, how they market, how they talk, language, basically bringing all the armament that a large corporation would do to bring to bear thought leadership and applying it to a very small business. To give you a couple of key metrics, year over year for this year, they have quadrupled production without having to necessarily impact any other operations. They've had to hire some people, but basically they're now, for a month of January, where they normally get small orders to replace stock, they sold out every single bottle and keg that they had. And it was just wiped out. This is January 1st. On the web, we tried to capture particular phrases like best mead in Georgia, mead near me, a bunch of different things. And I should say that this came as a little bit of a petty revenge, because another meadery had claimed that and said they had some of the best mead in Georgia. And I had seen it in an ad pop up, and it just pissed me off. And I'm like, that's not going to stand. So I'm like, we're not going to go up a head-to-head attack against paid media. Let's do this on SEO. Let's do this on social. So we did this. I hadn't been paying that much attention to it in 2020. There was a few other distractions. But it turns out we started out the year in 2020 with absolutely no key terms on the first page of Google. Not a single one. We were all buried in 4th and 10th pages. By the time the year closed, we had 68 first page results nationally. And I mean, I'm not sure how many of you have paid for SEO. That was huge. So that, in conjunction with their social media marketing and I think some good production planning, has just propelled their business forward. All of this, and just to tie this into a bow, all of this comes back to a very clear set of strategy, a very clear set of goals, and a very clear set of who we're talking to. So in terms of offering your storyline, there's a couple of things I tell people all the time. It's like the freebies I tell people when I have a pitch meeting with an agency and we go in and talk to a new client. You're going to get homework. Like, we're going to walk out of this meeting and you're going to have to do some things. And typically my pitch meetings have been described as therapy. And I force people to start thinking and analyzing their own personas. And a lot of it comes down to, why do you exist? You know, what's your real purpose? Why, if you stopped existing, what would happen? What gap would happen in the marketplace? And it forces people to think about this. Like, do you deserve to exist? Some brands don't. You know, some brands, they could go away and you wouldn't even know it. Other brands, if they went away, you'd be really struggling to replace them. And then some people don't really know what their value is. They've been struggling trying to figure out, like, well, I think I can do this. This is what I do. And that's a constructive place to start. But really, why does somebody that you want to be a client or a customer, why do they need you? What is the value you're bringing? So a lot of these questions are kind of existential questions that they're just big ideas, and they end up leading into brand platforms. So that's one piece of the homework I tell people. The other piece of the homework is, you should have a brand platform. Like, you should be able to tell people, this is what I stand for, and this is how you can see it. And this is kind of messaging 101. If you've never seen this, it's a basic message map. Starts at the top with a big idea. Then it's 3 supporting points. And then underneath that is supporting facts that help you back it up. The idea of this, and it came from years and years of looking at this, I am a fan of political speech. And just walk with me on this. It is amazing how a politician will pivot a conversation back to their talking point. It doesn't matter what you do to them, all the time. They will just bob and weave, and you always seem to be back at one of those 3 points that they wanted to make. And next thing you know, it's like, God, I don't know how that happened. That's what brands need to do. You need to have a platform. You do not come off your platform. You could change it. Like, over years, it might evolve, but I don't care. You go back to that platform over and over and over again, and you make it a broken record. And the reason for that is, that's the reputation you're curating. You want everyone to be thinking about you this way. So Matt, you were talking about, making how many beers? 280 beers?
Off the top of my head, I think we've done about 280 different beers over 3 years. So I know we've done at least a new beer every week. We do a lot more than that occasionally, with our name being Variant, we have a pretty strong focus on variety and getting people to step outside the box and try new things and doing things that are a little bit different from what I think beer was a few years ago.
Right. So your personas would skew towards that explorer personality, the experimenter, the risk takers. Your name is right on brand. The day you stop doing that and you start to get production oriented and you start to lose that sense, you'll lose your sense of brand. But I think, just to hold you up, as just because I learned more from you quickly, you are a good example of living a brand. And then you attract your tribe. So your employees you bring in end up being more exploratory. Your reward systems become exploratory. So they talk about like these integrity gaps between the thing you say you do versus the thing you actually do. If you reward innovation, well, that's closing up that gap. Like we want our employees to be this kind of personality, which I could imagine would be challenging because you end up with a bunch of nutbags that are just constantly mad scientisting something. And I would think that's hard, but it's on brand and you attract people that want to do that. So that to me is what I do for a living, is I help people understand how to connect those dots. Kind of open for questions at that point. I can certainly share some things from an illustration point of view if you want to see what something looks like, but I thought this would be better as just a conversation. It's
Charles, so Charles is, I think it's fair to say, is a competitor to Matt, although maybe far enough away not to. But how would you describe what your value is or what your persona is?
We have a different business model. Matt's primarily an on-site place where we do both. We get out into distribution. We were geared for volume production, but we also keep good 10 to 12 different beers on tap, and 4 of them are pretty much standard. They're always going to be there, where the other 7 or 8 are always rotating in something new. And rarely do they come around again, because everybody comes in to the tap room and says, well, what do you do? What have you done different and lately? And that's a lot of the craft beer market. They said, well, I've enjoyed that, but I want something new. And so we always try and keep those people engaged.
So ideally, Charles, and if I was to look at this, I would say you got a pretty good overlap of Venn diagram with other breweries, but really every brewery has its own little personality. So that you're not so much competitors as collaborators. It's kind of like that. What do they say? Like, 1 is a fluke, 2 is a competition, 3 is a trend. If you look at what happened in Marietta, let's say at the Triangle, where you've got now 5 brewery type categories in a densified area, they're all thriving. Like they're not necessarily in the competitive space because they've now attracted a capacity and they have a shareability among the audience, because beer drinkers, mead drinkers, cider drinkers, they're flighty. They do go from one to the next, and happily so. And I really love the industry because I like the collaboration. I like the fact that we're not really competing. Everyone's got their own little niche, and the ones that didn't find their niche, they go out of business. You find they go away, and it's not great to see, but it happens all the time.
Yeah, I'd also like to throw in, and tie it back into the original, trivia questions that you were throwing up. Georgia was 47th per capita breweries. There's still a big opportunity here. Part of that is our laws in Georgia have not been greatly suited for breweries until recently. And we still have a long way to go to compete with some of the other states that are a lot higher on there, like North Carolina, like Vermont, like Colorado, like Oregon. All of those places have a lot more breweries in a much denser area, and they all survive off of each other. A rising tide raises all ships, and breweries in Georgia are very much along that with that tide. We're trying to bring people in and get them to explore craft beer, because our community here is not, even though there are a lot of breweries, the community is still learning about craft beer and trying, what a New England IPA is and what a fruited sour is and what pastry stouts are. And the more we can turn people onto those styles, that's more people drinking craft beer rather than, the market share for macro beer like Anheuser-Busch and Bud Light and these, these big dominant Miller Coors, all these places. The craft is still only about 14 to 16% of that market share. So we have a long way to go, and we're all beneficial to each other. We're in this together.
So I got some questions for you on the marketing side. I mean, besides the traditional stuff, how much content do you develop? Like, are you guys actively developing content?
Define content.
All right, so good example. You're talking about a consumer public that is somewhat uneducated, which I think, and the challenge I think with the beer drinkers of the world, I think I looked at this it's between 24 and 33 is the highest capacity drinkers, men. You have to think, like, they're all emerging markets, like they're all new. You don't get a new beer drinker that comes in wildly educated.
Sure.
So now, how are you doing things like, look, let me walk you through what a fruited sour is. Like, let me help you understand this. Do you do that kind of content?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a part of our hiring process, and in our employee handbook and just our culture in general, we have a strong focus on consumer education and helping consumers learn, especially, I can't speak for all cities. Atlanta's probably a little bit more educated when it comes to craft beer, but especially when we opened, Gate City had only been open for about a year. So, but before Gate City, there was no brewery in Roswell. And so the Roswell audience really had to learn about beer and learn about beer styles. So consumer education has always been a big part of what we do. We train our staff to do it. We want to talk to, it's harder now with COVID, but we still definitely try to explain to people what they're drinking, why they might like it, what do they drink at home, so we can help them find something they like, which is also part of the reason why I wanted to have so many taps and do so many different beers, is because I don't want someone to come in and be like, I don't like IPAs, and see, just a board of just IPAs. I want people to be able to find something that they like, that they're passionate about, that they enjoy. And I want them to leave more excited than when they came in.
Right. So just as a show of hands, how many people on this call are involved in the marketing of what they do? Everyone. Okay, pretty much everyone. And I'd ask Matt, I'm kind of picking on Matt. I shouldn't be picking on Matt. When I asked about documentation, I'm talking about things like articles, opinion blogs, writings, basically writing it down stuff, like long form writing it down. Because what I find with many of the clients I'm working with, that's a typical tactical miss. And I work with everybody. Like I just wrapped up a project with a low voltage installer. I didn't know anything about low voltage installation. And part of the role was to help them rebuild their website, reposition them, yada, yada, yada. So they do all this work, and they make what you'd consider brochureware. And again, because we're a small business, so this is something you're going to cross. You make a whole bunch of brochureware, which is basically what I do. Like, this is what I do. What they're not doing is talking about all the nuances and the issues and the challenges, because these days, Google Hummingbird doesn't care about what you do. Like, they really just don't. Like, they don't reward that kind of material anymore. What they do reward is education. So for them, in just talking to them in one meeting, they brought up a whole bunch of issues that we just fixed this problem. You had this thing going. I'm like, why are you not writing an article about that? Like, just, if you have it in your own head, just write down 600 words and you're done. So that kind of effort really does help build authority. And when we talk about brand positioning, and I know I'm bouncing all over the place, but in terms of an online presence, let's say, authority is king. Like, having that position is king, and having that material is king. So it goes back to foundation. You've got your brand, you've got your personas. Your personas have issues. You can write to those personas as if it was a love letter and say, look, this is what okay, I'm not going to pick on Variant. I need to pick on somebody else. Give me another business. I heard some kind of installation. John, you do technical land systems.
Yeah, managed IT services.
Okay. You're dealing with procurement, you're dealing with IT specifiers, you're dealing with engineers, you're dealing probably with construction and building maintenance folks. Like, that's across the board.
Yep.
You, in your head, I promise you, you've got 16 opinion pieces that these people don't know, and they would be benefited from knowing. And they, when you think about that personality, when you think about that persona, and you picture them and say, look, this is what I would tell you on a bar stool. You know, this is one thing that all my clients come up against, and it's a problem we have all the time. That becomes opinion articles. That gets fed into the system. The system then treats you as an authority. You build prominence. So in the case of the low voltage wire installer, one of my walk away moments was I said, guys, you need to work on your articles. You need to be doing 2 opinion pieces a month for the next 12 months. And you need to seed the internet with that information. And it's very specific. And it's become a broken record. And the reason it's a broken record is across the board, almost everybody I talk to is doing a terrible job at this. But they all know better. And it goes back to write about simple stuff, write about simple things, help build out you as an authority on that.
And Eric, if I could, just for time's sake, because maybe people will catch up with you afterward, is the idea that the content is only for your website, or is this also used elsewhere?
Oh, it's everywhere. I mean, it shows up. It could show up in your social media channels. If you're building out, let's say, we'll call it a blog because it's still used often. You can do that targeted to personas. You can use it as a lead generator, you know, feeding it out to salespeople and say, look, you know, we just published some information that might be helpful to you. But it's all around that messaging platform that says, okay, this is what we stand for, and this is what we specialize in, and this is the problems that we solve for. And then you start to build out ideas around it. And again, we could sidebar this, or I could certainly offer you some free advice of how to do it. The one giveaway I tell people all the time is don't write long form. Don't try and sit down and write 600 words. Sit down and write 15 headlines and make them stupid. Make them like, you know, middle school level headlines, simple stuff that just says, hey, this is something someone asked me about. And you write down a headline. And then you go back to it now and then, you kind of browse the headline, say, you know, that was kind of interesting. Let me write this down. Next thing you know, you're telling these stories over and over again, and they become lore. And that is what helps build out the reputation of the brand. So that's just a methodology of doing something better with your website than most people are doing. And things people search for. I just had a conversation this morning with someone. They said, how can we do articles that are more directly related to sales generation? Simple. Start with how do I? How can I? It's not, and I don't want to see anything like how can I generate more sales? This was a very specific product. This was, it was not polymer. It's polymer wheels. Heavy duty polymer wheels used in mining and construction and automated vehicles. Like they're basically just these heavy duty plastic casters, and they fall apart. They fall apart for specific reasons. The issue with them comes down to if one of them falls apart during your production line, let's say you're a Mercedes and a couple of these wheels fail, your whole automotive line now just came to a grinding halt and you got to replace these wheels. And the funny thing is, you kind of know them coming. Like if you do inspection, you could see a wheel's failing. So one of the things I suggested to them is like, there's early signs of failure. Just talk about, you know, how to identify these early signs of failure to prevent the downtime, which is so expensive. That's an article. That's a discussion. That's not something you're going to see on their evergreen corporate, you know, brochureware. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about because people are interested in that. And more than that is Google is interested in that. And unfortunately, Google still rules the world.
All right. We're going to wrap up to respect everybody's time. Eric, good, interesting conversation about what you stand for and then how do you convey that. And I can also imagine listening to Matt a bit where he was talking about his handbook and stuff. I can see how the blog articles either become something that's coming from the employees or is going to the employees because that's what's on Matt's mind, and he's helping give them stories as the wait staff, right? They're telling the same stories that Matt wrote for them. So I can see how that can really get out there. So thank you for sharing all that. And if anybody's got any questions for Eric, of course, you can reach him either through, you saw on the slide before, you can put that back up. You can either reach Matt at this address, and of course, Uli and I and Jerry can help you find him as well. In wrapping up, one more meme for a final thought. Thank you, Jared. Always good. And
That's how I feel about it.
yeah, while we will not be hosting an event next Monday for because of the President's holiday, a couple good topics are coming up in the next few weeks. Marketing in the virtual world. So all the thing that Eric's talking about, well, how do you do it virtually? I know Charles was talking about doing a virtual tasting. So Charles has already figured out, how to bring his world into online. So part of that will be with Eric. And then in a couple weeks, what's the role of swag or merchandising? Clearly, Matt's figured that out as we look at him on the screen. What's the role of merchandising? And then Scott will be here talking about what's the new office look like. And Don, I saw you were on the call today too. Look forward to hearing from you about discovering trends in a few more weeks. So thanks everybody. Eric, thank you again so much for sharing. Uli, great introduction to Eric, and hope you all have a great week.
My pleasure. Thanks for having
Hey,
me.
appreciate it all. Thank you, Eric.
Thank
Thank
you.
you guys for coming on.
I want in on that virtual tasting.
Do the real deal. Everyone's open, we'll we got outdoor seating.
That's a whole other conversation. All right. Thanks, I guys.
Appreciate it, guys.
All right, take
Thanks,
care.
guys.
Thank you all.
All right.